Welcome to the Whale Scout podcast, everyone. My name is Whitney Negebauer, and today is Earth Day. Happy Earth Day. We are joined by Ariel, Yseth. Yes, give a hello, give a happy Earth Day.
Happy Earth Day, everybody.
Well, today is sort of a special day. We've been waiting for Secrets of the Whales to come out on Disney+. And so for those of you who don't know Ariel, you may have seen her in land-based whale watching opportunities in the Edmonds area. She does a Run for the Whales fundraising campaign. She's also our newsletter editor, and she helps produce these podcasts. So I wanted to share a little bit about how we got the email from the people that are publicizing the Secrets of the Whales and how it all came upon us.
Yeah, so I was just sitting on my couch one day going through my emails and came across this email that said, hi, this is so-and-so from this publicity company in New York. We're partnering with Disney Plus and National Geographic to help promote their new documentary and new photography book coming out. And I first thought this is the most elaborate phishing scam I've ever seen. So I was a little blown away. I didn't think it was real, and so I had to look up their server, and I went online, did a full investigation before I clicked any links, and then found out, oh, this is real. And I had a probably 5-minute long freak out moment, just so excited that they reached out to us and that it was all legit. So
yeah, and so Secrets of the Whales is like this 4-part documentary series about whales and about whale culture. And it's a really cool idea, and it uses some really amazing photography and technology to capture these whales. I think today we're going to do a review of the series, but it also includes a book, which you can see behind me. And it includes you have it too.
Yep.
A National Geographic magazine edition, and it kind of, I guess, dives into the science behind whales and culture. So that's really exciting. And this is all being released on Earth Day. And so I just wanted to talk about the series, what your thoughts were. And, right off the bat, I would just want to let everybody know that this series is inspiring, and it's a really hopeful series. It's not something that you'll watch like some other documentaries where you're going to feel really depressed for days on end and angry and frustrated. This is something that I think is going to be a really hopeful thing, and I recommend everybody watch it. What were your initial impressions?
So my first feelings, especially after watching the first 2 episodes, I had this excited feeling inside, and I normally don't get that because, like you said, a lot of whales documentaries, I'm just like, oh shoot, there's these bad things happening, this isn't good. But my first introduction to whales in general was through Free Willy, and I remember just as a kid always being so excited watching all the footage of southern residents swimming freely in the ocean. And I would say this is the first time I've felt that way watching a whale film since then. So just not having that feeling of feeling sad watching this, everything ends on a positive note, and it's just so overall it's just very ethereal and otherworldly. And I don't know, I feel like we always think of what it would like to travel to another planet and meet aliens, and I'm I feel like that's kind of what they did with different whale species. And I don't know, it was just a really cool experience.
Yes, for those of you who are also big Free Willy fans, I recommend that you go and watch a previous episode of the Whale Scout podcast where Ariel nerds out on Free Willy films. The other thing, so the 4 episodes are orcas, and then humpbacks, and then belugas and sperm whales. So it kind of takes you around the world and it dives through culture with these 4 species. One of the things that I noticed right off the bat was holy visual quality. I mean, it's like, especially on some of the humpback footage, I noticed in particular, it's like, not only are you seeing like the details of like the barnacles on the whales, it's like if barnacles had barnacles, you could see those. I mean, just
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah. I've noticed every time they did a close up of a whale's face, like you could almost see like the reflections in the pupils of their eyes. Like, so you could literally see what the whales were seeing. It was so cool.
Yeah, and just their skin, like the texture of their skin, you could really see. And particularly on the belugas, you don't really realize how much texture there is. Just little nicks and scratches, and the color comparisons between the calves and the adult whales. It's just really striking.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
In the Orca episode, there were a few moments that like really took my breath away. And a lot of this is storytelling. So like the skeptic in me is always like, is this true? Is this how it really happened? But there's a part in that first episode where I don't want to give it away to people who haven't seen it yet, but they go to New Zealand and they're working with Ingrid Visser, and they're learning about the orcas that teach their young, and that's the culture, right? This like learned behavior passed on through families, how to eat stingrays and how to flip them over so they, sort of go to sleep and they can eat them basically. And there's this moment of like prey sharing between the whales and the photographer where the orca just kind of like leaves some stingray there, and Brian Scary is sort of explaining like, what is this for me? Are you prey sharing with me?
Yeah, and you can all like just the way they filmed like the whales and the angle they had, you could see like the movements of the head like looking back towards the stingray and then kind of moving back towards him. So it just like it seemed really obvious like that's what was going on, but it was so like one of those moments you're like, there's no way, but that's definitely what's happening. It's just like so mind-blowing.
Yes, and there was, I guess, a sort of a sad part in the orca episode where you do see a mother orca carrying her dead calf. And I think that they had like a little snippet of it in the trailer. And when I first saw it, I thought, oh, they have footage from Tahlequah, right? Like this is culture. They're explaining grieving and mourning and, close family bonds. But as you watch the full episode, we learned that that is not, in fact, Tahlequah. And I think that people who are seeing the clips of it are assuming it is Tahlequah. But that sort of says something that, this was actually an orca population in the Atlantic. And they may have similar behaviors that are learned and passed down and, express grief. So I was really struck by that, just the timing that Brian Scary, the photographer, was there at that moment and was able to capture something so stunning like that.
Yeah. It makes me wonder too if orcas have some way of like passing on culture from like group to group across the globe too, because in the humpback episode they really like dive into that, how humpbacks all across the world, like their culture kind of moves from one group to the next and like storytelling amongst them. So like seeing that, knowing what we went through with Tahlequah, and then seeing that it happened very similarly in Norway, it really makes me wonder if they have a similar capability as well.
Yeah, people are actually confused. They think that is Tahlequah.
Yeah, like three people asked me that. I'm like, no, surprisingly it wasn't. It was someone else.
Yeah, and I should say Southern residents were actually not featured at all.
Yeah.
And so that I thought was sort of interesting. The most studied whales in the world weren't included. But a lot of the culture that we've learned from other orcas around the world certainly stands true with southern resident killer whales.
Yeah. In a way, I like when the southern residents do get the attention. But it was kind of nice to not have the attention on them for once and just like give a chance to like spotlight other populations and learn something about them. So personally, I appreciated that in different way than normal.
Yeah. And I should say, like, it got me thinking, they're also very protected. And a lot of the footage that was captured here was taken underwater with the photographer Brian Scary getting in the water and free diving with whales. And that, of course, is something that we should say is not legal. You have to have a permit to do that. And I think that may be why some of the footage was not captured in the United States.
Yeah, they really, it seemed like they went kind of to the ends of the earth to get some of this footage too. Like, I'm wondering if like some of these animals had never laid eyes on a human before. That's how far away they went into some places. Like they went to Antarctica and filmed killer whales there. And I'm just like, that's a place where like there aren't people. Like, it just, yeah.
Yeah, that is something that actually came up in the interview that I did with Brian Scary, because I had to ask, in my mind, and I'm watching these incredible encounters, in the back of my mind, I'm wondering, what's it like to be the photographer, to be calculating the risks to the animal, the possible disturbance to the animal, and also balancing the benefits of sharing their stories with the rest of the world and what those conservation implications might be. So I had to ask him about that. And he sort of shares this story that, these whales are, of course, ambassadors to their species. But when he's in the water with them, he thinks in most cases that he is the first human that they've encountered. And that so he is an ambassador for all humans to the whales. And so that he has to like be responsible and to, put the best, the best behavior forward, I guess.
The best fin forward.
The best fin forward. Yeah. So, I thought that was a really good answer. And I do think that, he has his heart in the right place for sure. But yeah, and the amount of time and effort and luck to get some of those shots is just outstanding.
Yeah.
Well, what about the Humpback episode? Were there parts in there that you felt were just really cool?
I have to be honest, I don't know. Like, basically, as the series went on, it went on to species that I know less and less about. So, like, basically by the fourth episode, I'm like, I don't know anything. I'm learning so much. And my brain was just, like, on overdrive. But with the Humpback episode, I believe one of the places they went to was Australia. And they learned how the whale song each year originates in Western Australia. And it gets passed from whale to whale to whale until it reaches, like, thousands of miles away. And I really like how they equated that to having like a hit song every year that just catches on. And I don't want to ruin it, it's a spoiler, but there's one particular technique that the humpbacks, I believe around the Cook Islands, use to pass along the song because they're so isolated. And there's one thing that they do that makes their song travel a lot further. And my mind was just blown and I was almost crying watching that.
Yeah, I too share some of the similar feelings about the different episodes where I felt like I was really engaged with the beluga episode and the sperm whale episode because I know the least about them. And so I had the most to learn and the most to understand from those episodes. I'm just looking at my notes for like the beluga episode where it's talking about belugas having potentially the largest vocabulary, using facial expressions and possibly even names. Just stunning.
And you could see that too a little bit. Then I started paying attention to some of the footage, and they do have a little bit of what seems like muscular control around their mouth, and you could see the edges of their mouth go up and down. And I'm like, oh my gosh, are they actually smiling? Like, is that what that means?
Yeah, it was really cool. And just to see the footage of so many belugas in one place, I was able to watch a little bit of these episodes this morning with my kids because it's now like on the big TV and everyone can watch it together. And they're in very shallow water, and so they're doing a lot of spy hopping, and you can see just whale bodies everywhere.
Yeah.
And they do this behavior that I've never heard before, where they stick their head and their tail out of the water in very shallow water, and they call it the banana.
The banana.
And my daughter, the banana. And I was like, that whale looks like a banana. So yes, you learned something new of that other whales, new behaviors.
Yeah. And like northern residents, they rub themselves on the beach. Like on the bottom of not on the beach, the bottom of the sea floor, which I thought was really interesting.
Yeah, yeah. Discuss this place where belugas congregate, and not only are they having calves, but they're also, they called it like a spa, where they're able to sort of warm up a little bit and repair some of their skin as if it was at a spa. Some of the footage here captures things that have never been seen on film. And honestly, I think my favorite episode was the one about sperm whales. And I know very little about sperm whales. I know they're very elusive and difficult to study. I've never seen a sperm whale. Have you, Ariel?
No.
No.
But this episode did inspire me so much that I did buy a sperm whale replica. So to add to my whale collection.
Do you remember? I'm just remembering this now. When there was, I'm trying to remember what the name of the whale was, but there was a sperm whale that was heard on the hydrophone network up in BC just a few years ago. Do you remember that?
Yeah. They found it near Johnstone Strait, and it eventually made its way down, and some people in the San Juan Islands were lucky enough to get to see it on one of their whale watching tours. But I remember watching a video clip from one of the whale watching companies, and they had their hydrophone in the water, and you would hear these nail gun snapping noises, and I'm like, what is that? And it's the sperm whale like echolocating underwater, and it's so intense and loud, and like it's amazing.
Yeah, the way you just did that sound is perfect. It sounds just like that. And in this episode, they sort of talk about how those click trains and what they call codas are passed on, and that learned behavior is the culture in the sperm whales that is seen around the world, and it's taught in different groups, and it's different everywhere they go. So that was really cool. They also have the very first footage of a sperm whale nursing. So, right, sperm whales are the largest toothed whales, okay? They eat giant squid, and they're deep divers, and they have these, like, really narrow, long, skinny, lower... Yeah.
Tiny jaws.
So... Right? Like, it doesn't, like, make a lot of sense when you consider their biology. How would a baby sperm whale nurse? But it's captured on film. You should see it. It's really cool.
I believe I watched that episode before you did, and I was messaging you like, oh my gosh, you have to get to the sperm whale episode. A couple minutes in, you're going to die. It's so cool. Trying to text you emojis so you would know kind of what to expect, but not really. So.
Yeah. One of the other parts that I want to bring up, I'm going to go back to the belugas, is a part that like my daughter really likes too. This is not a kid's documentary necessarily, but I think kids can watch it depending on how they do with like predator prey types of films and a little bit of blood. But there's this story in the beluga episode where there is the certain area where beluga and narwhal habitat sort of overlap. And a wayward narwhal is literally adopted into a beluga pod. And it's able to survive like a full year at least in that beluga pod. So the scientists are using evidence from this adoption, really, where this narwhal is learning how to hunt and learning how to survive now in this beluga pod using the beluga travel patterns and using those habitats and food sources. And seem to be doing relatively well, even a year later. And in the narration, they call this literally cross-cultural acceptance. What were your thoughts on that? And like, what lessons can people learn from from these whales?
Well, to me, it seemed like a more extreme version of what's happened with L87 Onyx. For those who don't know his story, he's a southern resident from El Pod. And JK and El Pod, they're all family and they have some shared language. But they do have a few differences. And L87 lost his mom when he was really young, and his older sister was not able, for whatever reason, to take care of him. So he went pod hopping and was adopted into K-Pod for a while. And then when some of those females passed away, he was integrated into J-Pod. So even though like southern residents are clearly the same species, that was the barometer I guess I had to know that whales to some degree adopt each other. But this was totally like a shock to me, because narwhals and belugas are similar species just based on like how they look, but they're also very different. And just the fact that belugas have that much empathy and like emotional intelligence to adopt one into their group, like that was just incredible to me.
Yeah, I'm so glad that this series decided to focus on culture. It's something that, like, when you talk with scientists and, even other people that are just in the whale world, that culture has almost been this, like, uncomfortable subject, right? Like, typically people think that culture is reserved only for people. But scientists are finding and are proving the existence of cultures in other species. And so I think it was really cool that National Geographic decided to go in this direction and decided to like put it out to the masses. I think it's just a great way to connect with people and a great way to inspire conservation.
Yeah. I think there are some people who don't have a lot of exposure to the natural world, especially to like ocean life. We're lucky we at least get a glimpse of it from shore, or like just from basically living near the Salish Sea. But I think this will open a lot of people's eyes to the fact that what we consider human traits or like the unique human experience is really not that unique. Like we said, like they covered food sharing, they covered like popular songs that travel from whale to whale, and just caring for each other in these really intimate and extreme ways that I think it'll open a lot of people's minds to why whales in the oceans are so important and need to be protected.
Yeah, I wrote down a few quotes throughout the episodes, and one of them was, the secrets that they share help them prevail. And that's basically, the secrets are the, ways to survive that are taught between family groups, between, mothers and their young and other social groups. So I think it's really cool, and it really brings home community both with people and with animals. So, yeah. Do you have any final thoughts that you want to share?
I feel like everyone should just go watch this film. Take your time watching it if you need it, because there's so much to learn. I had to pause for a while before moving on to the next episode to just let things absorb and just kind of check my emotions with how excited I was.
Yeah. Definitely watch the episodes, and they're on Disney Plus. If you don't have a subscription, and again, Disney Plus isn't necessarily for kids either. There's other content on there. And also check out the book. It's full of photos that are taken from the film, and it gives some behind the lens, commentary from Brian Scary. And so that's really cool too, to learn about like what was going on behind each scene. And I look forward to finally finding a copy of this National Geographic magazine. I can't find it at like my local Safeway, but if we figure out where to find a copy of it, I will definitely share a link to that. And definitely go on YouTube and look for the Brian Scary interview. It's really fun. And if you like this podcast, of course, check out Ariel's other podcast episode with us. And be sure to like and subscribe. And also comment down below on your thoughts of Secrets of the Whales. And, we want to hear what you have to think about these episodes as well.
I will say I haven't seen it on or looked at it on Disney Plus yet, but I think at the end of each episode, James Cameron, who is the executive producer, also for 90s Kids, he directed Titanic. He kind of gave his little perspective on each episode, and I thought that was really cool to watch too. So be looking out for that at the end of each one.
Yeah, absolutely. And to learn more about Whale Scout, you can go to whalescout.org. Thank you all so much for listening.